Good morning. Welcome, welcome back. Thanks to those of you who are here for our start. We want to get this busy day going on schedule, so thanks for helping with that. And for those of you who are joining us just for today, welcome to you especially. And those of you who already know each other, look around for the folks you haven't met yet. A couple of announcements before we get going. There were a few schedule changes after our program book was printed. They're posted on the monitor in the back. But in particular to note, Delivering Health was moved from Wednesday, yesterday, to today. So that's on the schedule today, and you can see where on your monitor and on Pathable. You can also, at lunch today, hear from an exciting group of mobile tech entrepreneurs at the Vodafone Fast Pitch session. That's during lunch in the Golden Gate room, and lunch will be served in that room if you're joining that session. Also, our registrar, Fabienne, wants me to tell you, we are running out of the plastic badge holders. So if you are leaving or if you have somehow acquired more than one, please drop your extra one off at the receptacles at the back of this building or in Festival before you leave, because we will recycle those. Now, we've got a great lineup of folks this morning, several entrepreneurs you're going to hear from, some established, some just getting started, and a corporation that's doing great things in the financial inclusion space. So, to get started, I'd like to introduce Leila Janah, the CEO of Samasource. Leila is the founder and CEO of Sama Group. Sama Group is a collection of social enterprises with a common social mission. Since 2008, the Sama Group has gone on to grow successful social enterprises in sectors ranging from impact sourcing, digital literacy training, and medical treatment crowdsourcing platforms. Leila is a young global leader of the World Economic Forum, a director of CARE USA, and the youngest person to win a Heinz Award this year. She got her BA from Harvard and lives in San Francisco. She'll be joined in conversation by Kevin Jones. Leila? Thanks.
It's such a pleasure to be here and see so many familiar faces, and I'm really grateful that you all came out so early in the morning to hear about social enterprise. So I'm going to kick off by just telling you a little bit about the Sama Group, and I wanted to set the tone for my conversation with Kevin Jones by talking about an experience I just had in Kenya. I just returned from Kenya about 2.5 weeks ago. So what is the Sama Group? You heard a little bit about that. If we can just get the next slide up. There we go. So we are a family of social enterprises. Some of you may know us through our largest social enterprise, which is called Samasource. Sama means equal in Sanskrit, and our mission is to use technology to level the playing field for low-income people. We started Samasource 6 years ago with a mission to bring digital work to some of the lowest income people in the world. We thought if we could figure out a way to employ people in corners of the world where employment opportunities are really scarce, we could really change the game for poverty alleviation. So we started that 6 years ago. It evolved into a global outsourcing organization that has employed over 6,000 people and that has moved 25,000 people out of poverty. And we have a model that we call micro-work. So we actually work with large technology enterprises, primarily here in the Bay Area, companies like Google, Microsoft, and Walmart.com. And we work with them to take large data projects and break them down into small units of work. And then we train people in low-income communities to do this work from local computer labs. And I'll show you a little bit about what that looks like in practice in a minute. Out of Samasource, we started Sama USA, which is a domestic program that's somewhat similar. Sama USA trains low-income community college students and youth around the country to learn how to use their existing skills to earn money online. And so far, the program, we started a pilot last year. This program has been able to generate around $2,000 in supplemental income for students who do an 80-hour boot camp. And the average starting income for these students is around $11,000 a year. So we've seen some big impacts using the same philosophy of digital work. Lastly, we kind of went out on a limb and had an idea for the world's first crowdfunding site a couple of years ago for medical treatments. We were traveling through Africa and noticed a huge need for doctors who do surgeries to share word about what they were doing and to be able to attract donors directly. So I'm going to tell you a little story. This is where I was 2 weeks ago. This is Mathare slum in Kenya. Have any of you been there? Just by a show of hands. I love that in this audience I can ask that question and like 10 people raise their hands. So those of you who have been to Mathare know that it's a pretty destitute place. I feel like I've seen quite a lot of poverty in my lifetime, and I haven't quite seen something like this. There are open sewers everywhere. The community was built on a trash dump. About 800,000 people live in this slum. And I went to spend the day with one of our workers, a young man named Kevin Kihara. Kevin started working with Samasource about 1.5 years ago. He's chosen to stay in Mathare because he actually has a small house that he owns, so he's able to save 100% of his income. But just seeing what Kevin's daily life looks like was such a reminder of the power of this kind of work. The kind of work we do is a lifeline for people like Kevin, and there are so few jobs that pay dignified wages in a place like this. So I took a photo of this sign as I was walking into the slum. There's a huge challenge in much of East Africa around labor contracting. Young men get pulled out of these communities to go and work as laborers in countries that are building a lot. And many of them get their passports taken and are part of the cycle of human trafficking. And we wonder, what could we do to prevent this? And I feel like the core essence of what we do at Sama Group, of creating jobs, is the long-term solution to this. And these kinds of signs are everywhere in poor countries. You're probably familiar with them. So this was walking in, and then we got to Ken's house, and he talked to me a lot about what it was like to raise his daughter in these conditions. He was orphaned at age 10, and his first job in the slum was putting his hands in an open sewer to collect little pieces of metal that would wash in from different parts of the slum, and then he would sort the metal and take them to a local trash collector to make probably about $1.25 a day. And that was his first job at 10 years old. And unbelievably, this young man made it through secondary school. He got a scholarship to attend a secondary school outside the slum. And when I visited him, he took out his worn collection of favorite novels, including Moby Dick, and told me that he was a great fan of literature, and that his biggest challenge was that the kinds of jobs available to people like him in a place like Mathare didn't really rely on his brain power. So he was pretty depressed for a while. He tried many different jobs. He tried making this local alcohol called Janah, which a lot of people are addicted to. He tried anything he could do to make a few bucks a day, and then luckily he was selected into a program that trains young people in digital work skills. And that program is a feeder for Samasource. So you can see here, it's a program called Nairobits, and they're all over Africa. And they train young people in using computers and also using computers for relevant kind of job skills. So he learned Photoshop, he learned blogging, and then he heard about Samasource through our recruiter. Since he started working with us 2 years ago, his entire life has changed. He's been able to put aside money for his daughter's education. He pays for several siblings to survive. Several of them still live in Mathare. And he has a completely different outlook on life. And I think the biggest challenge for people like these is that there's a sense of pervasive hopelessness around jobs. And there's this sense that it's never going to get any better. And I think that the least we can do for them is to fuel their optimism by connecting them to work. So with that, I'm going to invite Kevin on stage, and we'll talk a little bit about the evolution of this organization.
Great. Good job. Thank you. Thanks. Remember the lemonade. So Lila, we've known each other a while. Let me tell you a story about knowing Lila when she was a real raw startup about 6 years ago, I guess it was. And I got Lila a little gig to be an intern for a YPO-like thing, small group, support group of really experienced social entrepreneurs. Jim Fruchterman of Benetech, Rebecca Massasak of TechSoup, my partner Tim Freudlich. And so then there was some cause that came along, people were donating to. I asked Lila, can you donate? And she said, well, no. And she said, to keep Samasource alive, I'm actually had to give up my apartment. I'm sleeping on the couch of my former boyfriend, and I'm eating ramen. And I was like, wow, that... Echoing Green asked the question, what will keep you going when things are bad doing your mission? So I did this kind of small, silly thing. I started giving her a check for $50 for protein every month, just so, put some chicken on the ramen. But, so I've known that, and now she's a success. And actually recently did well enough that you just bought a house here, and congratulations, in San Francisco. That's kind of, it shows you're up to 10 million in revenues, right?
House is kind of a euphemistic term for
right,
what I bought.
houselet, yeah. San Francisco houselet, yeah, that kind of thing. But, the nights when you're on the couch thinking, this is, I've hit a wall, this is not working. What kept you going?
So first off, I have to thank Kevin, because I don't even know if he knows this, but Jim Fruchterman, who he mentioned, who was in that group, was our very first client. And he gave us a $30,000 contract right around the time that I got the protein donation. So
$30,000 and $50,000.
Exactly.
So that's good.
But those are the kinds of things that keep you going. I think for me, the constant validation from the point of view of the workers, and I made it a point, even when it didn't make so much economic sense, to go back to Africa and talk to local people. It was the only thing that really kept me going in the end, that made me feel like no matter what people were saying in the outside world, and we got a lot of negative feedback early on. I had people literally telling me, there's no way that these poor slum women are ever going to be able to do, computer work. They need food and water and clothing before they can do that. And, it was really hard to illustrate to people that the way they could purchase food and water was if they had a job.
Right.
So, and there were a lot of
charity mindset just was getting in the way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of preconceived ideas about education levels in Africa, and now we work all over the world. But people have the sense that people are poor and helpless and not very bright, right? And you go there and you realize that talent is equally distributed. It's just opportunity that's not. So what really kept me going was meeting people like our workers. And I remember getting a note from one of them on Facebook in the early days that just said, maybe you're not aware, but the fact that we had work at all, we worked in Dadaab in a refugee camp in Kenya, a really desperate place. He said, I don't think you understand the true meaning of what you're doing here.
Wow.
Because people here are so hopeless.
Right. And
just the exposure to all of these different ways of working, and to the fact that, they can be on a level playing field from the middle of Dadaab is pretty eye-opening for all of us. And I kept getting that validation from the people in the field. And, even when you're feeling really terrible, you're sitting there in San Francisco thinking, like, my life is not nearly as bad as that. And here are these people who are so grateful, and so I'm not going to stop.
Yeah. Were there people telling you that you should get a job? You're smart. You're capable. Stop being living on nothing.
I heard everything from marry rich to, moonlight doing this and get a real job, to turn it into a big corporate outsourcing company, because we were doing, our revenue growth on the sales side has always been really healthy, and we're starting to see really great economies of scale in some areas of our work. And so a lot of my friends were like, why on earth would you build this as a nonprofit? Like, you should build a big profitable outsourcing company. But my whole point in doing this was to use our model to show funders that it wasn't actually so risky to move these kinds of projects to really low-income places. And to do that, I thought we had to be a nonprofit.
And what caused the wheel to turn, the door to open, that you could afford a small apartment, or live a life where you're not just staring at somebody else's ceiling?
Well, I'd say the house was actually the Heinz Award. It's amazing. There are a lot of organizations that exist out there to support social entrepreneurs, and it's kind of a random process to get connected to them. But I feel like there was some grace involved in that. In prior years, we had a steady revenue build. We had a really solid management team. We had good audits, and so funders were willing to invest in us because they started seeing that we had the capacity to really do good work. And I remember having several conversations with funders who said, look, doing this work doesn't mean that you have to starve. And you shouldn't feel ashamed to take a salary that allows you to live a dignified life in San Francisco.
Right.
And, especially as an unmarried woman in San Francisco, there's a lot of expenses that you have on your own, right? And I think that's a huge lesson for me. And I try to tell younger social entrepreneurs, don't try to be a martyr. You're trying to do this for the long run.
Right. When did you really think your model was going to take off? And now you're up at seven-figure, eight-figure revenues. When did you think it was really going to take off? Was there a sign that just, hey, we're going to make it?
I'm still really waiting for it to really take off. Our team is all sitting over here and probably laughing at that. We see a lot of evidence of success, but we're pretty hungry for more. And I think one of the things that has made us moderately successful, I still think there's so much room for us to grow, is just that we have a lot of drive to do more. And we look at the numbers, and there's so many, the unemployment crisis in just sub-Saharan Africa alone is huge. So it kind of forces us to keep going. I think that one pivotal moment for us was when the Rockefeller Foundation last year decided to invest $80 million in Digital Jobs Africa, which is an initiative that in many ways was linked to Samasource. We were their first grantee in this category. Wow. And I remember talking to their VP of strategy in the early days and saying, look, I really think this idea of bringing digital work to low-income communities in Africa is is one of the solutions we can embrace for various reasons. And there was, initially there was some resistance at the foundation, but they have a lot of really smart people, and over time this evolved into a huge initiative. Yeah. And I think that kind of validation proves to the world that what's now called impact sourcing is a business model. Is
a real business model. Not everybody should keep going. Sometimes when you hit a wall, the models, you should know the model's not working. I ran into some driven folks who should have quit a while ago. What do you tell folks like that? Like, maybe it really isn't working. Maybe it's not you. Maybe you're not the right person. What kind of advice can you tell people to not be like you?
I think a few things helped us out. One was setting really clear goals and saying if we can't hit these goals, if we can't hit this kind of return on investment, that's going to trigger an evaluation process and put us sort of on, not on probation, but at least on alert that at some point we should stop if we don't start seeing a change, because we'll just be wasting donor money. Yeah. And for us, that ROI point was always, my concept is, are we doing better than going to Africa with suitcases full of cash and giving direct cash transfers? Right. And if we're not, if there's no sort of leverage of the model, then we should really reconsider what we're doing. And with all of our programs, when we started Sama Hope and Sama USA, we set really clear targets. For Sama USA, for example, we said, if students don't earn at least what it costs to train them per person in the pilot, then that should trigger an evaluation, and we should be really careful about expanding or even continuing to fund it. And luckily, that program, thanks to the amazing leadership of its co-founder, Tess.
Raise your hand.
Thanks, Tess. That program has, stand up, Tess. That program has done remarkably well, and I think that focus also made the team realize that we have a goal to hit, and we have accountability here.
How about Sama Hope? Is it hitting its milestones?
It is. So we have a goal of treating 1,000 patients this year, and we're at about 500, and we've a bunch of things that we're planning for the website to scale it. The challenge, and I'll just add this on to what I said earlier, along with those kinds of metrics, I think you also need to realize that every model has an incubation period, and our CFO, who comes from Oracle, has said to our team, we really think that there's a 3-year incubation period. Most things can't really get off the ground and show any traction for about 3 years. And so what we look at is, can we fund something for a 3-year horizon? And is our board comfortable with making a 3-year commitment? And I think that's roughly the time that you need to determine whether something's going to be a success.
And this is the second year for Sama Hope?
This is, well, we relaunched the site in November last year, so we're sort of counting that as a start. And before that, there was like $25,000 in funding from an angel. So.
Yeah. What's next? Is there a for-profit spin-out or anything else that you're going to build?
So we have 3 enterprises now, which are keeping us really busy, and Sama USA and Samasource are quite similar, so we really kind of view those as 2 programs that are working together.
Do it in the U.S., do it in Africa.
Exactly. Yeah. And what we've realized is that we can use our brand now, which has strong brand recognition, to start thinking about developing one additional business line that could bring us more revenue. So Samasource is a really amazing business from the standpoint of how many people it can employ and how fast it's growing, but it's not a very high-margin business. Low-end digital work is becoming more and more commoditized, so it's a healthy social enterprise, but we don't think it's ever going to generate profits that can kick back into the group and fund new ventures that we want to start, or subsidize the operations of something that's not as revenue generating like Sama Hope. And so we have a concept in mind. I can't share all of the details, but it's in the beauty category. and it's in the luxury space, and we're evaluating different options for launching a brand that can generate these kinds of returns for the group. And I think at that point we'll probably take a break.
Yeah, yeah. And the beauty category would be sourcing from some of these same people, more jobs for the same people.
Exactly. I mean, one of the core tenets of Sama Group is giving work, and you know, we really believe that dignified work is a solution to a lot of the problems that we see, from labor trafficking to sex trafficking to child malnutrition, right? And so this is a different method of giving work that involves sourcing not digital work, but sourcing raw ingredients from low-income communities. And I think that there's a huge opportunity in this space to look at categories like luxury, where the margins are really high, but typically go to LVMH marketing budget,
right.
Or they go to these very large corporations, and I think very few social enterprises think about tackling that space.
Right, right. The luxury and fair trade thing, I mean, Alter Eco is one of our investees, and they have a new truffle that actually has all the social value baked in at that margin, and so but chocolate doesn't quite cover all the social goods. So that's I'm seeing some people do some interesting things. Nobody's done anything quite big enough yet.
I think Mayette is really interesting. I haven't followed the social impact side of that story, but I think they've done a really beautiful job of building a luxury brand that also highlights artisans in developing countries. And I think that that's sort of a riff on the traditional fair trade model that's gaining more traction. Yeah,
and then you would be the spokesmodel entrepreneur kind of thing for this, whatever you call that.
We need to have a product first, but yes, that's the goal.
Yeah, because I mean, people are putting you on magazines, and then you're giving the money from the photo shoots to Samasource, right? I mean, it seems to be where the idea came from.
So I will say that, and I don't. Probably other women social entrepreneurs in the room might have thoughts about this, but initially I was kind of conflicted about using my personal brand and story so closely tied to the nonprofit, as part of my work. And then at some point you just realize that that's your job as an entrepreneur, is to use what you have to offer to build your organization. And I think because there are so few younger women in tech and younger women in social enterprise in tech, we get a lot of opportunities to tell our story and a lot of invitations to panels and being featured and that sort of thing. So it did come out of that. We thought, well, how could we leverage this more? And what could we do? We're getting so much attention from women's magazines, for example. And unfortunately, the people making decisions about Samasource type work are typically middle-aged men, in tech companies in Silicon Valley, not reading Marie Claire. So, so we do, I think we've been sort of market-driven and opportunistic from the beginning. And when we see an opportunity like that, we evaluate it.
Yeah, and it seems like it's really there. You get the attention, but then you can source the goods that are incredibly high margin, that are going to the same people.
And it only works if you have a fantastic team that can execute flawlessly, and I'm really proud of our team. We've built it out a lot over the last few years, and so I'm able to go out there and do my thing and know that the home fires are burning.
Do you ever, you're a role model for a lot of young social entrepreneurs because you built something from nothing and at sacrifice. What do you tell some other entrepreneurs? I mean, do you get into evaluating, well, maybe you should quit, or do you just say, press on? What do you tell somebody when they can be wrongly inspired by your example to keep hitting a wall that they can't break down?
Well, I will say that the things that are most worth doing are the hardest, usually. And there were several moments that I could have quit, but I remember reading a Ben Horowitz blog post. He's from Andreessen Horowitz, a venture capitalist, and he has this saying, "Don't punk out and quit." And I think it's often like right after those worst moments that the best moments can come. And last year I had a huge issue trying to push this new strategic plan through, and there was some disagreement in our board, and it was really, really, really hard. There were several moments when I just thought, like, I don't know if I can do this longer. And I think doing anything requires, my philosophy is I'm going to put 10 years into this and see where it is and push through those hard times. I think the other thing is, my grandmother used to say this, she hitchhiked around the world after World War II. She's a Belgian woman, and met my grandfather in Calcutta. And she had this motto, trust the world. And when my parents were getting their first mortgage and really scared, she leaned in and told my dad, you know, fear not, the world is beautiful, trust the world. And I think that's kind of true. And I think if you allow other people to help you and you allow other people in, you'll be often pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, you know, when I run into lots of, you know, would-be visionaries and that kind of thing, and if they're not being followed by people, or if people aren't helping them, if there's not social capital coming in, another thing I've learned from Echoing Green is, you know, what are your volunteer resources, and are people giving you more things now? And they did with you. I saw something that you were worth some protein. Jim Fruchterman thought it was worth a $30,000 contract. I mean, that could be an indicator too, because the world did show up for you. You know?
Absolutely, and I will say, like, as a counter to don't punk out and quit, you also have to be rational. So if you're really not hitting the goals that you set for yourself, and if donors are after 3 years still having issues, even in the, you know, even if you can show them really good data, and I think having a clear impact model that you can be rational about really helps, then I think that should call into question what you're doing, right? So it's not don't punk out and quit for anything. If a model's not working, you need to adjust it. Yeah. But I do think that a lot of people quit prematurely or quit before trying to pivot. And trying to build something new if what they're doing is not working, and I think it's especially true in social enterprise because it's just so hard. You know, I feel like we have all the burden as nonprofit social entrepreneurs of, you know, tech startups, but without any of the upside.
Right.
So it really is sort of mission and calling oriented work, and I think it requires a certain level of resilience.
Yeah, you know, and you know, there was a Jim Fruchterman around that you could reach out to in the Bay Area. Sometimes it's hard. In a particular entrepreneur I was working with a while ago, a Native American company called Native Touch, they needed to know the distribution for cosmeceuticals. Well, you know, luckily I could find somebody at Social Venture Network who knew that kind of thing, but I realized that's a real hard thing. So we've invested in a company called StartGrid that finds you the domain-specific mentor that you don't have in the Bay Area. What do you do any mentoring to younger entrepreneurs?
I do. I try to do it more ad hoc, and I actually I mentor a couple of the daughters of women on our staff.
Oh, wow.
Who are younger, and they can come by the office often. I really enjoy it, and I've been lucky enough to be mentored by a number of amazing people. I met Howard Schultz a little under a year ago, and the way he's built Starbucks is so inspirational to me in terms of our mission of giving work. So I feel like I have some kind of a duty to give back. It's also tough, though. There's so many demands on your time.
There are,
set a limit.
Yeah, finding the right ones. We have about 45 seconds left. What would you say to a young social entrepreneur looking at you saying, I want to be like her, I want to grow to 10 million from almost zero? What advice, how should they follow your path?
I would say that the most important thing is to clarify your core values and why you're doing what you're doing, and then when you've decided on a model, to embrace it with grace, grit, and optimism.
Grace,
my
grit,
grandmother
and
told
optimism.
Me. Yep.
Words
to live by.
I like it. Okay. Thank you, Leila. Thank you. Thank you for the open. It's great. That worked really well. Thanks a lot. That's great.
Thanks. Grace, grit, and optimism. So thanks, Kevin and Leila. And you're going to hear Jim Fruchterman's name mentioned again, believe it or not. We did not plan that quite that well to know the connection between Sama Group and Jim Fruchterman, but he's going to come up in a little bit to talk more about his leadership. And now we're actually going to bring on 9 up-and-coming entrepreneurs to do quick pitches. They are finalists for the Gratitude Awards. And we're excited to have partnered with Randy Haykin and the Gratitude Network team this year to bring these awards to the stage. So I'd like to welcome Randy and Lynley Sides and the 9 entrepreneurs as we get these stools set for them. And they're going to give you just a taste of what their enterprise is about, and then you'll be able to get to know them better at the Innovation Showcase in the Impact Hub over there during the day, and you'll actually be able to vote for your favorite. So this afternoon we'll announce the 3 category winners as well as the People's Choice winner. So, Randy?
All right. Thank you, Liz. In the words of a great social innovator that I look up to, good morning, San Francisco. The Gratitude Network was essentially set up to identify, nurture, and then help grow incredible social innovators around the world, both nonprofit and for-profit. And so what you're going to hear on stage today is 9 incredible, incredible stories. A number of people have asked me, where does the name Gratitude come from? And I guess it's borrowed from a book that I know a number of you have read, in which it's stated, "To whom much is given, much is expected. To whom much is given, much is expected." And so the spirit that we have at the Gratitude Network, our team and all the people that we work with, is about taking what life has given us and giving something back. I think a great example of this is SOCAP in general, and I wanted to thank Kevin Jones and the SOCAP team for making it possible for us to highlight some of the entrepreneurs who are here every year, some incredible people who we now have a chance to recognize, and you'll hear from each of them. Lynley?
Great. Thank you, and good morning. I'm Lynley Sides, and in leading my own social venture, the Glue Network, that is a platform where companies engage their customers and employees in giving to good causes. I work with large nonprofits and small social ventures across categories and around the globe. And through that work, I have seen the power of entrepreneurship to create solutions that are innovative, impactful, scalable, and self-sustaining. So I was honored to work with Randy last year to create the Gratitude Awards, and then to work with SOCAP this year to expand upon them. So let's see. So this year's Gratitude Awards were open to organizations that are early and growth stage, both nonprofit and for-profit ventures that could be located anywhere in the world. We were thrilled to receive over 500 applications to the SOCAP Scholars and Gratitude Awards programs, and we've accomplished the daunting task of narrowing that pool down to 32 semifinalists, and then to the 9 incredible finalists that are here on stage this morning. And from this pool, 4 winners will be selected and announced on this stage this evening at 6 o'clock. We first want to thank our panel of expert judges who brought expertise from our 3 categories, as well as from nonprofit, philanthropy, social entrepreneurship, and investing. We want to thank them for their time and effort and expertise in narrowing down this pool and choosing our finalists. We also want to thank our screeners who are not on the slide but are listed on the Gratitude Fund website, and a few of whom are here. So thank you to all of these participants for your help in this process. So a little bit about our 3 categories. Last year, in our first year, we focused on education, and our 3 winners are still doing well and growing in Kenya, India, and here in the US. Why education? We believe education is truly foundational, that improvements in education result in greater success of all nonprofit work that is done in a region. And this category spans primary, secondary, higher, and adult education. And over the last 2 years, we've seen an incredible variety of creative solutions in this space, and have worked with a number of them and are looking forward to adding another 1 or 2 to our portfolio this year. This year, we've added 2 new categories. One is health and wellness, which is clearly an area of great need to reduce suffering and cost and deaths due to preventable causes and so forth. This category spans traditional health, health tech, and clean water. And we've seen some very creative models and solutions, and we're excited by the ones that we've seen this year in our first year in this category. We also added the category of community development in keeping with the SOCAP theme. This is a broad category that includes hunger, shelter, substance abuse, microfinance, multidisciplinary programs. The key is that community-led improvements tend to be very positive, effective, and long-lasting. And we've seen a tremendous amount of entrepreneurial spirit coming from individual communities, and we're looking forward to supporting a couple of those in the coming year. So At the end of the day today, one winner will be announced from each of those 3 categories, and then there will be a 4th winner that will be chosen by you, the People's Choice Award. You will hear from the 9 finalists here in just a moment. You'll also have the opportunity to talk with them in the Innovation Showcase in the main hall until 2 o'clock this afternoon. Voting will be open until 3, and the way to vote is go into Pathable, open this session, scroll to the bottom, and click Session Poll. And it only takes a couple of seconds to vote for your favorite. So please cast your vote for the venture that you believe is the most innovative, has the greatest potential for impact, and where the founder has the skills to scale and grow an organization. So it's with great respect that I hand it off to our 9 finalists, beginning in the category of health and wellness. With Nora Health.
Hi, I'm Katie Ash, and I'm co-founder of Nora Health. We train patient families with health skills to improve outcomes and save lives. The baby in this photo is Anup. I met him 2 days out of open heart surgery in Bangalore, India. When it was time for him to go home to his rural village, a nurse came over and gave his parents an 8-minute shotgun lecture about everything that they needed to know to keep Anup healthy and safe. Keep in mind that they were returning home to a rural village that was 2 days' travel from the nearest health clinic. They only had elementary level education, and they returned home from that hospital completely horrified. We saw this situation play out over and over and over again, and I had experienced it myself as a caregiver for loved ones, feeling completely helpless. And statistics say that the majority of people in this room have provided care for a loved one at some point in their lives. We think that this is one of the largest unmet needs in healthcare. We take this highly motivated, compassionate resource, the family members, and we train them with medical skills to be highly effective at providing care for a loved one. We design and develop mobile tools so that when those families go home, they have the support that they need. We started out in one facility in Bangalore, India earlier this year, but we're already in 9 major urban hospitals in India. We've trained over 9,000 family members, and most excitingly, we're seeing a 36% reduction in complication rates. This started out as a class project 2.5 years ago at the Stanford Design School when we were a team of graduate students. But since then, we've built a team that has decades of both health and tech experience. If you're excited about what we're doing, if you want to help us scale, if you know an organization that we should be partnering with, come find us. We'd love to work with you. Thank you.
2 minutes on the nose.
Does anyone know what the largest mass poisoning in human history is? It's the arsenic and fluoride water crisis across India and Bangladesh, affecting over 200 million people and leading to 1 in 5 deaths in Bangladesh alone. You can't see or smell arsenic, but if it's in your water, you'll get arsenicosis, an incurable cancer-causing disease leading to death. My name is Minhaj Chowdhury, and as a Bangladeshi American, I always wondered why people like my grandpa passed away due to this crisis. As a Fulbright scholar to Bangladesh, I found 60% of all water projects to fail because jobs aren't being created and customers aren't paying to run the systems. I've launched DrinkWell to transform this crisis into opportunity for entrepreneurs living in these affected communities. We've developed the world's first indigenously produced filtration technology capable of cost-effectively removing arsenic and fluoride from the source, groundwater tube walls. Unlike reverse osmosis, the current best practice, we reduce waste by 6 orders of magnitude. Each system doubles an entrepreneur's income, creates 3 jobs, and reduces household medical expenses by up to 85%. Our team has experience deploying 200 systems across 4 countries. And most importantly, we found that people are paying for our water. And it's not because of the massive long-term health and wellness benefits, but because in the short term, we give people smoother hair, less briny fish, tastier rice, and whiter whites. That, ladies and gentlemen, is vanity. And that nuanced understanding is how we drive social impact to these 200 million people. We're Drinkwell. Join us as we make arsenic and fluoride poisoning history.
An average Indian lives 14 years less than an average American. I'm Shelly from Sevamob, and we address this gap by fundamentally transforming primary health care via mobile clinics and an online telehealth marketplace. Our mobile clinics serve low-income consumers in groups on an annual subscription model. For just $10 per year, patients get comprehensive primary care, medicines, and supplements, and most of this is delivered on their premises. We use technology heavily to manage health outcomes. We also operate an online telehealth marketplace through which internet-savvy consumers can get video consultations, second opinions, and in-clinic appointments from participating healthcare providers. In the platform, along with new revenue, the providers also get access to the same technology that we use to manage our patients and our health outcomes. We currently have 6,000 annual subscribers, all paying, from 4 states in India. And in our marketplace, we have more than 300 healthcare providers. So if you would like to partner with us, please come and find us afterwards. Thanks.
Do you want to introduce this category?
83 days. That's how long it took for my students' reading levels to finally catch up to where they had been before the summer. These are my first graders the day it happened: Karina, Maya, Sanaya, Carlos, and Travis. My name is Alejandro, and I'm the CEO and founder of Springboard Collaborative. I spent 2 years as a first grade teacher in one of Philadelphia's most impoverished neighborhoods. There, I became angry that my kids and millions more in low-income communities face chronic summertime reading losses in elementary school that account for 2/3 of the achievement gap in high school. This is symptomatic of an even deeper problem. Low-income parents have been left out of the process of educating their kids. Children spend 75% of their waking hours outside of the classroom, and yet our nation does shockingly little to capture educational value from that time for low-income kids. Springboard closes the reading achievement gap by coaching teachers, training parents, and incentivizing learning. Our primary offering is an intensive 5-week summer program that combines daily reading instruction for pre-K through 3rd graders with a weekly workshop training parents to teach reading at home in an incentive structure that awards learning tools to families from books to tablets in proportion to their kids' reading progress. Since launch in 2011, Springboard has grown its reach from 40 to 1,200 kids through major vendor agreements in 2 cities. This summer, our scholars replaced what would have been a 3-month reading loss with a 3.4-month reading gain. They'll go back to school this Monday, having more than doubled their annual reading progress. In schools with fewer than 10% of parents showing up for report card conferences, our weekly family training workshops average 91% attendance. By training parents and teachers to collaborate, Springboard puts kids on a path that closes the reading achievement gap by 4th grade. In a nation that uses 4th grade reading scores to plan prisons, this changes everything. Parents' love for their children is the single greatest and most underutilized natural resource in education. This is the key to giving all children the opportunity to learn, regardless of whether they're at a school desk or the kitchen table, whether the calendar reads January or July. Join us in changing out-of-school time from a barrier into a springboard for our kids. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Rebecca Harrison. I'm from the African Management Initiative. We provide practical and affordable learning tools for African managers and entrepreneurs. But I want to start this morning by telling you a story about a man named Simeon. Simeon woke up one morning at his home in the rural Eastern Cape of South Africa with chest pain. He walked to the nearest hospital where an excellent doctor immediately recognized the symptoms of heart disease, took him to the ECG machine to run a test, but the machine was out of paper, so she sent him home. This is a true story. I don't know what happened to Simeon, but without wanting to trivialize it, it's quite possible that Simeon died because no one restocked that machine. This is not a health story, it's a management story. It's quite possible that Simeon died because of a basic, avoidable management failure. Now, management is not a sexy topic. It doesn't pull at the heartstrings. It's not a very SOCAP topic. But it's absolutely critical. Bad management can be catastrophic. Good management can be transformational. The problem is that in Africa, over 90% of the roughly 10 million managers have no access to high-quality training and development resources. At the African Management Initiative, we're working to change that. We deliver practical, accessible, locally relevant learning tools to managers and entrepreneurs. We're developing the first ever social learning platform in Africa. So think Coursera meets Facebook with an African twist, designed with mobile in mind and for an environment where bandwidth is often constrained. We've secured exclusive partnerships with Africa's 3 most prestigious business schools. Think the Harvards of Africa, bringing world-class African management education to potentially hundreds and thousands of small businesses. And critically, we've developed a peer accountability tool that will help those managers apply what they learn on the job. That's the most important part. So we'd love to tell you more about how we're working to unlock the potential of the continent by empowering 1 million managers over the next decade. Thanks for listening.
My name is Brian Hill, and I'm the president of Jail Education Solutions. When I was growing up, my father taught in Folsom Prison here in California. And at night, he would bring home the essays of inmates, and he'd read them to us. And I distinctly remember feeling of the hopes and dreams of so many of these individuals and being so disheartened that so much human potential was locked up. But at that age, I had no idea that my dad's class was only reaching a small minority of a very large population. 12 million Americans cycle through our system each year, which means that 1 in 28 children currently have a parent that is incarcerated. This will have devastating effects both on our society and financially. The $74 billion that we spend on corrections in this country somehow leads to a 50% recidivism rate, meaning that half will return a short time after being released. What are we doing with the time that we have this literally captive audience that is driving such abysmal returns? Right now, we're showing daytime television. Jerry Springer and The Price is Right. This is not a formula for success, especially when we know it works. Educational and vocational training, when provided to inmates, reduces recidivism by 43%, and that's even when controlling for things like background and motivation. Moreover, every dollar we invest in these types of programming reduces the cost to the government and to future expenditures by $4 to $5 within the first 3 years. But it is expensive to do these programs. It is operationally challenging, and it is politically difficult to spend money in this space. This is where Jail Education Solutions comes in. We set up secure wireless networks in prisons and jails, provide tablet technology that allows inmates to engage in educational, vocational, and treatment programming on a daily basis. Inmates can rent or earn these tablets and achieve tangible outcomes like a GED, college credit, and time off of their sentence, all at no cost to the taxpayer. Moreover, they can not only begin their progress while they're online, but receive short-term incentives that help them earn entertainment options on the back end as a short-term carrot. Now, this program will reach 20,000 just next year, where my dad's class reached just 30. Moreover, my dad's course was cut back in the 90s, and with financial budgets now, it will never come back. Jail Education Solutions is exactly what America needs right now. We must stop the revolving door. So join us in helping unlock the immense human potential perpetually behind bars. Thank you.
Morning. My name is Samir Ibrahim. I am the CEO and co-founder of Sun Culture based in Kenya. We help farmers grow more while spending less. On the left side of the screen, there's a man named Peter. Peter's a farmer, and he was our first customer ever. Before meeting us, Peter was like most of the other 450 million smallholder farmers in the world, forced to grow very low-value crops like beans and potatoes because he could not afford irrigation systems to grow high-value fresh fruits and vegetables. Irrigation systems are too expensive, and more so the recurring costs associated with irrigating, like buying diesel for your water pump, was just too expensive for Peter. And because of that, on Peter's 1-acre plot of land, he made $600 per year. In 1 year, Peter made less than half of what each and every one of you paid to be at this conference. Now, this is a problem that's affecting smallholder farmers around the world, and we're changing that. Sun Culture designs and sells solar-powered irrigation systems that make it cheaper and easier for farmers like Peter to grow food. Our systems combine the cost-effectiveness of solar-powered water pumping with the efficiency of drip irrigation, giving Peter access to an affordable irrigation solution that removes most recurring costs for him. Now, Peter is using our system now, and he's making $18,000 per year. That sort of impact is what we want smallholder farmers around the world to feel, and we can do it. So if you'd like to learn more about our funding needs and working with us to impact the lives of smallholder farmers around the world, we'd love to speak with you. Thank you.
Does everyone here remember their first job? For me, it was Starbucks, my senior year of high school. And I didn't know it at the time, but that job actually prepared me for a lifetime of employment. I learned things like responsibility and how to show up on time and be a part of a team, and the value of hard-earned money. But what if you never get that first job opportunity, and you're young, you're creative, you're full of ideas and energy, but you're frustrated because the only ways you know how to survive are stealing, selling drugs, maybe prostitution? Well, this is the problem facing over 500,000 unemployed youth in slums in Kenya. But what if we could find a way to provide that first job opportunity to hundreds of thousands of youth all over the country? What difference would that make? At Livelihoods, we've seen firsthand the power of a single job opportunity to change a young person's life forever, and we believe in the power of young people to change the world. We operate a door-to-door distribution service to sell socially transformative products like solar lamps and clean-burning cook stoves, and we use a daily consignment model. So our sales agents get products on consignment, and they don't have to take a loan or any financial risk, but can earn an income and learn valuable sales and professional skills. We've already trained over 600 young people and opened in 4 slum locations across Nairobi. And we're growing. In the first half of this year, we've trained more people than we had in the past 3 years. And over the next 5 years, we plan to become financially sustainable by opening 32 locations and changing hundreds of thousands of lives. A job means hope, purpose, confidence, and that is opportunity, and that is powerful. So please come and talk to me and find out how you can take this opportunity to invest in our youth, because they will change the world, but it's our responsibility to make sure they know that they can. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Think about the shirt that you're wearing. Think about the phone in your pocket. These things were made by people, right? They're not made by machines. So what do you know about those people and the working conditions that they face every day? Not much, right? But the brand, and maybe that's okay, but the brands that you're buying those clothes and electronics from also don't have good transparency into what those workers are facing every day, and that's the problem. Last April, over 1,100 workers died when the factory they were working in Bangladesh collapsed on top of their heads. Why? Partly because those workers are invisible, right? They saw cracks in the walls several days before the factory collapsed, but they had no channel to report that to decision makers, to anyone who had the power to stop production. There's a simple solution to this lack of information and lack of transparency. Mobile. There are nearly as many mobile subscriptions as there are people on the planet today. So we have this incredible channel to connect the workers that are making our favorite products to the companies that are buying them, and eventually to us. LaborLink does that. We use the transformative power of mobile to give voice to workers. Workers trust us with information about child labor, about sexual harassment, about excessive overtime. So they're reporting this information to us anonymously, and through feedback loops, we give that information directly to decision makers, and we've been able to address these issues in real time. In the last 4 years, we've gone from reaching 100 workers to over 125,000. In the next 4 years, we're trying to reach over 1 million, because we believe that every worker should have a free and anonymous channel to report directly to decision makers about their working conditions and needs. Please join us, vote for LaborLink, and help us give voice to the global workforce. Thank you.
Well, wow. How would you feel if you got to get up every day and work with these 9? I'm like a kid in a candy shop right now. That's what the next year is going to be like for our team. So we are so excited and so thankful for all of you, and also for our 32 semifinalists who were just an incredible batch. And as I said before, SOCAP attracts just a wonderful mix of people, amongst whom we find young people like this who we want to give a voice to. Okay, final reminder here on the audience vote. If you haven't had a chance to go to your bit.ly address or on Pathable, we'd appreciate your vote. That's a tough call. I couldn't do it. Good luck to you, and thank you. We'll see you tonight for the awards.
Wow, as Randy said, it's really inspiring to hear these folks. And I knew they were great, but I hadn't heard them pitch yet. So please do vote. And you have to be logged into Pathable, and you'll see the session poll link. That's one way to get to the voting link. And obviously, the instructions are also on the flyer that was in your chair this morning. So while we reset for the next group, I mentioned earlier that we had, Leila Janah mentioned how important Jim Fruchterman and his organization was to her start. And we're going to actually hear from Jim and Betsy Beaumon and Penelope Douglas about the leadership and the transition at Benetech. So we didn't know about that connection, but I think it's illustrative of the growth in this whole space, the number of connections we see over and over between folks who've started and folks who've been around for a while and have helped each other, and how important that is for us to connect with each other and to share our knowledge and learning. And you also have the opportunity to do that with these 9 entrepreneurs you just heard from, as well as to our entire scholarship cohort of entrepreneurs. We mentioned yesterday that you can engage through StartGrid in seeing what our entrepreneurs might want to know and how you can contribute some of your knowledge and experience to them. So I hope you'll do that. Now I'd like to welcome our board chair, Penelope Douglas, to the stage, along with Jim and Betsy. Thanks.
Whew, it's bright out here this morning. Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Well, I'm very excited to talk about a subject that's important and also a subject of some passion for me personally and professionally, and that's the topic of founder succession. And I'm really excited to have 2 great colleagues on stage with me, Jim and Betsy. I'm going to let them each quickly introduce themselves to you by saying just a quick word about themselves, something that's important for the audience to know about you, and then I'm going to have Jim briefly introduce us to Benetech. So, Jim, give me a quick, who's Jim?
Okay, engineer, entrepreneur turned social entrepreneur, and I'm really passionate about technology. I am a deep geek.
Deep geek. That's true. Betsy.
Wow, engineer, social entrepreneur. No, it's true. We have some things in common, but definitely lots of years in high tech and a more recent social entrepreneur.
Great, thanks. Describe Benetech to us.
So Benetech is Silicon Valley's deliberately nonprofit tech company. And that means we're successful by definition, by the way. And what we do is we write software products for where the market's going to fail. So the technology exists, there's this great social application, and a regular venture capitalist would say, what's the worldwide market for helping disabled kids or human rights groups? We build those products that the off-the-shelf tools wouldn't be well suited for basically solving.
Can you give us an example? Give us a product or two.
So our biggest product, and the one we'll be talking about today, is Bookshare. And basically the thumbnail sketch is Amazon meets Napster meets talking books to the blind and dyslexic, but legal. So our goal was to reinvent the traditional library for the blind and dyslexic using two innovations. One, the ebook, so digital text instead of human narration. The cost to create a book like that is 1/100th of what it would otherwise be. And, for example, that's what Samasource would do for us.
Right.
And the second innovation was crowdsourcing. So we actually turned over creating a library to the community of people with disabilities, parents and teachers, to build that library so that any kid who needs a book to succeed in school and can't read a regular print book gets it in a digital form that talks to them, might be in large print or in Braille, but far more books, far cheaper. That's the goal.
And how global is your reach right now?
Well, you know, we have users in 100 countries, that sort of typical thing. But Bookshare has been really focused in the United States because of intellectual property stuff. Our other projects are majority outside the U.S. in human rights and the environment, are two other big areas.
Great. Betsy, do you want to add anything about the social enterprises of Benetech before we move to the founder topic?
Yeah, I think, and this will probably come up more in our conversation, but you know, Bookshare has become a foundation for other things we can do. So we're in over 20,000 schools and districts in the United States, and that means we can provide more services. So it becomes a really interesting foundation for the other things that we can do to drive impact.
That's great. Thank you. So here's the interesting story. This is a story about succession planning, but not necessarily, in my mind, a typical story, at least not as I understand it from spending some time now talking to Jim, whom I've known for some time, and to Betsy. First and foremost, there's a kind of an interesting SOCAP landmark part of this story because it turns out that Jim and Betsy met at SOCAP in...
The first one.
The first SOCAP, 2008. And I'm sure when they met, each of them had something on their minds that drew them together. I'm just guessing, Jim, that maybe what was on your mind had something to do with building this massive social enterprise and being a founder and CEO. What was going through your mind as you came to that first SOCAP?
Well, up until that moment, we had about 3 roughly $1 million social enterprises. And we had just won a $32 million contract from the federal government. So $6.5 million a year. So Bookshare went from $1 million a year social enterprise to a $7 million a year social enterprise. And as the founder, and by this time I'd been doing this for 15 plus years in different forms, I was kind of a little straining at the seams. And so I was thinking about how to solve this. So we were maybe 6 or 9 months in. We needed a lot of help. You know, we outsourced a lot of our stuff to social enterprises like Samasource and Digital Divide Data. But I was worried about succession. And I had talked a lot to senior social entrepreneurs about succession and heard a lot of horror stories, you know, how the second CEO after the founder had completely flamed out in year 1, how the COO didn't work out. And I had already tried to hire a COO and had failed a few years earlier. And so I was thinking, well, what else might that be? And so came to SOCAP, met Betsy, and basically identified a different kind of succession plan where instead of hiring a COO, someone who kept the trains running on time, hire someone who was more like me, an entrepreneur, an engineer too, which is important to me as a geek, but someone who could actually run an organization, be responsible for the strategy, build a product line in that sector, and also offer my organization a succession plan rather than someone who maybe didn't have the outward-facing responsibilities. And I think that's what we got.
So Betsy, why were you sort of able to be lured into this conversation? What were you thinking about when you were meeting up with Jim?
Yeah, I came to SOCAP. I had heard about it through just looking on the web. My company had been sold some months before. I went to Africa, did some volunteer work, and was really looking to get back into social enterprise. I had started a social enterprise before, and had sort of gone back to the dark side for a while. Okay. So I wanted to come back to this, and I thought, what a great place to do that. This sounds like my people, and I felt like I met my people here at SOCAP. And one of those was Jim. Somebody said, oh, you do tech, and he does tech. You should meet. Mm-hmm. I came here thinking, I know, I can do consulting, because I was doing a fair bit of that with some women entrepreneurs and such. And then Jim tells me, well, look at our website. And so for me, the fact that it was a general manager position and had a lot of external focus was critical, because I had actually turned down COO kinds of jobs. I am much more comfortable being kind of in this bigger picture and with a lot of external focus as well as running the trains. So that was a big part of it for me. If he had come and I'd met him and he had a COO role, I would have thought it was interesting, because Benetech I found extremely interesting. Yeah. But it probably wouldn't have gotten me.
I think you just highlighted a couple of really interesting points. Benetech is a really alluring company. It's a great success story. And I know if I had been in your shoes, it would have been hard to stay clear-headed, actually, about, well, gosh, if Jim wants me to come work for him, I'd almost do it no matter what he tells me he wants me to do. It can be that kind of conversation. We've all been there in this world of kind of, where passion and mission are so closely aligned with business interests. So I can't imagine it was as easy as you two have just described it. You meet at SOCAP, you carve out your roles over a beer, and you're on your way. And Betsy, you told me a little bit about, how you really needed to be super clear with Jim about the job you wanted. And I think there was a little bit of a dialogue about that. Can you bring a little more of that forward for us?
There was, and I would also have to give tons of credit to the rest of the senior team at Benetech, who were very singularly focused on Jim really needs to hand this off. Yeah. And I heard every day for my first few months, Jim really needs to hand this off. Let's make sure this is happening. And for me, I never felt that he wasn't. In fact, there was one point after about a year where I said, can you stop now? I kind of have enough. Can we slow this down a little bit? But one of the things that Jim asked me, one of the best interview questions that I ask all the time toward the end of the interview process, which is, what can I do to make you successful in this role?
It's a great question.
And I said, we have to mind meld, and I have to not only work with you internally, but I have to see what you do externally in all of these different venues. Mm-hmm. And he was very great about that. So
again, you've raised a couple of to me, what are really important points. You were in a real dialogue. And it was definitely a dialogue of peers. And the senior team clearly deserved a lot of credit for also being very focused on this for you and with you. So I think those are excellent points. Jim, from your standpoint, during that first year with Betsy, were there times when you realized that you were still too founderish or too, not letting it sort of happen the way you actually wanted it to but couldn't quite let it? Was there any of that kind of stuff going on?
No, because I had that failure mode a few years earlier where I didn't let go, and that's why the prior COO had left.
Okay, so
because I didn't hand over any control, and I'm sort of ADHD, and I really I'm kind of the serial founder who's not as good at operations, more good at creating. And the way Benetech's structured, I can go off and do new things. I don't have to get rid of Bookshare. I can go off and do other things. So my roles shifted. So I got to do things like learn about how Washington worked, because winning the largest ever special ed award as a novice bidder turned out to create gigantic political problems. And I got phone calls from Washington saying, I hear you have horns and a tail and bribe the program officer. Where are you? And I'm like, I didn't know I was supposed to lobby Washington. And I got to work on a treaty for the last 5 years, and we got an international treaty to make Bookshare able to expand globally. And so I got to be an international diplomat, play at it. And that's great, because it kind of plays to my hyperactivity, doing new things. And what Betsy's job is to say, this is a moment for Jim to play a cameo role. or this is a relationship that Jim has owned for 10 years, and he can't abandon this. Yeah. We're going to do this jointly until this person gets comfortable with Betsy being the primary point person.
Does that sound like the same landscape you remember in that first year?
It does, though we remember our meeting at SOCAP quite differently, which we're happy to tell you later. That is very true. And I think some of those long-term external relationships have taken the longest to really transition over, because Jim's been in this particular field for now 25 years. Yeah. And so these people have known him a long time and told me great stories. But, so that has definitely taken some work, and we still have to work at that sometimes.
Well, it sounds like you two have a lot of fun together, which I think is also a really important part of the equation. I think you and the entire team actually, find moments for fun. If you'd seen the three of us getting ready backstage, actually, you shouldn't have seen the three of us getting ready backstage, because there was such a lightness and buoyancy and sort of spirit to us wanting to come out and talk to you that, and I think that's critically important for building these complex enterprises, because this is hard work. These are very complex. We're all business people. We started as business people who became entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs, and therefore, I think we know really well how hard this is, because these are very complex value propositions. So can you share with us very quickly, when you need to get back to that spirit of levity that we were able to find backstage, what do you do for one another?
We wrote a song together at
there we go.
And performed it.
True. Do you want to do that now in our remaining?
No. But I think it's really important. When I went to Comdex, which was the big conference, I was a tech entrepreneur for 7 or 8 years, and I went to a party with
Comdex, right?
1,500 of my closest friends, right? And when I got to the social sector, everybody was lovely, and everyone cared about social change, and they were nice, and I went, wow, I want to do this. So my advice to people is go to the parties, because we have to put social into social entrepreneurship.
Well said. Okay. Betsy, you said something when we were talking on the phone that I think would be a great place for us to close, which was, it was again, the business and social entrepreneurship perspective, and it was about how the combination of the two of you and this kind of unique, this isn't succession planning in the textbook sense. I mean, you didn't go to your board and start a process and end a process and all that, but you described it as a growth strategy, actually. Can you describe that for us?
I can. It's been a growth strategy on two levels. One, we talked about the growth strategy within my program area, so taking Bookshare, and I've been able to come up with new products, new visions, new ways to take that, and it's grown 4x or something in that time. At the same time, though, because Jim was able to focus on other things, it meant that our human rights program had more wind in its sails. It meant that Jim could help start some new things at a Benetech level, like our Benetech Labs initiative. So it really has fueled growth, I think, across Benetech, not just in one area.
And I think the other thing that's worth mentioning is, I used to be where everyone looked for the vision and the leadership, and that was kind of the last thing that kind of changed. I'd say that took like 3 or 4 years. But now, Betsy has actually set the vision for where all of our literacy and education projects are going. And when people come to me and say, can you basically, give us a pearl of wisdom, I say, well, either you should talk to Betsy, or I will channel Betsy briefly, and then you should talk to Betsy. And I think that's a really important transition, because a real CEO-type leader is the person responsible not only for the operations, but also for where are we going, how are we going to raise fresh money, who are our new customers going to be, and now I get to be more of a cheerleader for that as opposed to the originator of that.
This is a huge point and a great point to close on, because not only the respect that you're showing one another, but the clarity about how to continue along a vision as well as a strategy path is critical. And thank you so much for telling us about this. We managed to do that right on time, I want you to know. We're at 0000 on our wind down clock. Thank you both so much for being with me. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's now my pleasure to introduce our next conversation, and I'm going to introduce Dan Schulman. He's the Group President of Enterprise Growth at American Express. This is a division of American Express that's working to raise awareness for and address the issues of financial inclusion in the U.S. and globally. Dan has led American Express's financial inclusion efforts, which include the development of banking alternative and prepaid products for the financially underserved, called Bluebird and Serve, and advocacy efforts like the new documentary Spent, Looking for Change, which I hope all of you have already seen or are going to see or are going to get online and see. It's a fantastic film. So with that, I want to welcome Dan, who's going to be in conversation, I think, with our own Kevin. It's nice to see you.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks. Right. So just to set the stage, he's the corporate in the jeans and the boots, and I'm the entrepreneur and the coach. We like to look like something different. Dan, I'm really excited that you are here and talking about financial inclusion. You know, we can make money reducing the cost of being poor, not making money off the poor. And it's exciting that American Express and other folks, you know, PayPal is here and other folks have real revenue targets around a mission where the market overlaps with justice. Doesn't happen every time. Fair trade, you have to subsidize some of the cost. With this, that's actually, you can make money, smartphones, big data, reducing the cost of being poor, financial inclusion. That's new. And so we've had corporate sponsors before. You're one of the first who has actual revenue targets around things that the entrepreneurs in this room would be working at, things that the Village Capital Financial Inclusion Cohort are working at. So that's new. Why is American Express there? Why is this now a corporate goal? Why does this make sense as a business?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a saying that inspires me every day, that it's expensive to be poor.
Yeah.
That couldn't be more true in the financial services arena. The things that you and I take for granted, cashing a check, paying a bill, sending money to somebody you love, they're incredibly time-consuming and very expensive for a huge population here in the United States and across the world. There are over 2.5 billion people in the world that are financially excluded from the traditional financial system. Here in the U.S., incredibly, there are anywhere between 70 and 100 million adults, almost a third of our population, that don't have access to bank accounts. And so when they want to cash a check, their hard-earned money that they've gotten, some working 2 or 3 jobs, they have to go to a check cashing location, stand in line for 30 or 40 minutes, and then just to give them cash, the check cashing location takes anywhere between 2 and 4% of their check to give them cash.
Right.
And then when you have cash, what can you do with it? You can't do anything really with cash. You can't pay your bills with it. So you have to go to another location, stand in line for another 40 minutes, and get a money order to pay your bill. So for a typical cable bill that might cost $50, you pay $11 to get a money order to pay that bill. With technology, that just doesn't have to be the case anymore. We actually can dramatically reduce the cost, simplify the experience, take all that unproductive time away, and create kind of alternatives to what traditional banking is, and do so profitably. So for us, you know, my charge coming into American Express a couple of years ago were, how can we rethink financial services because of what's happening with technology? And what I found is there is a huge population that needs this technology, and it inspires us to create different and innovative ways of thinking about products.
Right. Has American Express done any official sizing of the market of financial inclusion in the U.S.?
Well, in the U.S. alone, I'll just give you a couple of statistics, and you can define it any way you want.
Right.
The FDIC defines it as about 70 million Americans who are either unbanked or underbanked. And underbanked means you use things like a pawn shop or check cashing location. You may have a savings account, but that may be it. The study just came out that anywhere between 50% to 65% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck.
Right. So that's the size of the problem. What about the size of the market opportunity? If you're doing things like reducing the $11 out of $40 cost of paying a bill and the hour-and-a-half cost, what's the economic opportunity too?
So this population spends about $1.3 trillion of spend in the U.S. alone. So, you know, the myth that, you know, they're not disposable income is completely wrong.
Right.
But what the fees and interests that the underserved population pay last year alone was $89 billion. So, like bounce checks, you know, those checks you write and you bounce. I don't know how many of you have seen actually the T's and C's of a checking account recently. But the typical checking account, terms and conditions, is 110 pages long, which is 2 times Romeo and Juliet.
Okay.
And the only thing they have in common is they're both sort of a tragedy in their own way. So Americans spent over $30 billion last year on bounce checks.
On bounce checks. Wow.
$30 billion. And a lot of banks still do what's called high-low sorting. So if you have 3 checks that come in, one for $10, one for $50, one for $100, they'll cash the $100 check first to put you into overdraft immediately. So you have $40 in your checking account. So they get 3 overdraft fees instead of maybe 1 that might have occurred. And so
institutionalized predatory tactics.
There are a lot of bad practices that are out there. Payday loans are probably the worst of them all, with interest rates that can be, you know, 20 times, you know, credit card rates. It can be anywhere up to 300, 400% interest rates on that. So my thought is that technology can take that $89 billion that's spent right now, and, you know, sort of the personal goal we have is how can we return half of that back to the underserved population? How do we take that $90 billion and save at a minimum $45 billion? Because the problem is, it's not that people don't have revenues don't equal expenses. It's that the cash flow is very uneven. Revenues may be coming in when your expenses are low, and then you can get hit with a car accident or a leaky roof, whatever medical emergency. And then once that happens and you have no savings, you go into this downward spiral. And so if we can return that money back into the economy, back to people, and start to encourage things like savings, we might be able to make a real dent in the issue.
And for Amex, you have kind of an exclusive brand. With the brand comes privilege is one of your things. These are folks who are not privileged. You've been kind of an exclusive brand. How do you brand and tell the story around financial inclusion? And then you're even putting on a movie here.
Yeah.
How does the brand and the story fit in?
Yeah, well, there are a lot of conversations around that at the board level and at the senior level in terms of what does it mean for us to rethink what our brand stands for. And our brand has always stood for, in my view, sort of integrity, security, service. Not necessarily mass affluent, although our most famous products, our charge and credit card and the black card and that kind of thing are obviously at the mass affluent. But the company is 164 years old. I mean, it started as a freight forwarding company, and there's nothing less sexy than freight forwarding. We basically sent over Stagecoach and the Pony Express packages from one coast to the other coast for people that were going out west and needed to move things. And
it was an express,
Right, it was literally, that's where it came. Wells Fargo and American Express were together and created this. And so the brand has not always been mass affluent. It started off more populist than that. But the issue for us is that technology is fundamentally changing financial services right now. If you stand still, you will fall behind. And honestly, we could now, for the first time with technology, think about new segments of the population in ways that we never could do before and serve them with a great value proposition. And that, to me, was the key.
Big data, smartphones, make the
You've got to get software platforms, smartphones, and then relationships with a bunch of retailers to reimagine what banking could be out there. And you can do that profitably, but be a consumer champion at the same time. And so our whole idea was, and the rallying cry in the company was, move our brand from being exclusive to being inclusive. And that was a big step for the company. And the time that
it's a pivot for a huge company.
Huge pivot for American Express. But when we saw the success we were having with some of the products that you mentioned, you know, it really started to resonate, and it's inspiring, quite frankly, to be part of a company that's actually trying to address financial exclusion.
Yeah, and why the movie? They've got a great documentary that is showing here. Why tell a story about it? Why tell the story of the need the way this movie does? And if you haven't seen it, you should see it. We're showing it.
Yeah, so the documentary is called Spent, Looking for Change. We worked with Davis Guggenheim, who some of you may know of. He did An Inconvenient Truth and Waiting for Superman. And what we really wanted to do is that people hear statistics around financial exclusion, you know, like 70 million people or 89 billion of fees, but most people do not understand that this isn't just about, you know, the very lower income level. This is really about the new middle class, is the way that I define it. Every single one of us in this room either knows a friend or personally or a family member who is struggling right now in some way, shape, or form.
More now
that's
than
happening.
before.
Yeah, absolutely. It's happening in my family. It's happening to everybody. We all know somebody. And what we wanted to do is, with this documentary, and I'd encourage everybody to watch it. It's 38 minutes long. It doesn't take a lot of time. But we released it on YouTube because we didn't want to do whatever those elite film festival things are. We just was like, let's release this free of charge on YouTube. Just about 18 million people have seen the documentary. 18 million people, which is wildly scary. We had a couple of members of a couple of senators and congressmen put out press releases saying, you know, all Americans should see this. And the reason we put out the movie, and there's nothing about American Express in there. It's like at the very end of their credits that say we help sponsor it, but it was to put a human face on the problem. Because if you really want to start a conversation about financial inclusion and have it be a real issue, it's a little like I saw some of the presentations that some of the folks did this morning, and they tell stories about individuals, and it makes things come alive. And what I think to really address this problem, there needs to be a whole ecosystem that comes together. It can't be government. We can't rely on the government to address this problem. They don't have the resources to go and do it.
Or the will.
And it's a very divided, you know, very partisan body right now. And so to expect them to pass legislation of some sort that is going to fundamentally fix financial exclusion, I just don't think we can count on that. I also don't think we can just count on academia to put out research papers, although they put out extremely important bodies of work, or the nonprofit world. This has to be a partnership between government, regulators, private enterprise, public, NGO, that kind of thing. And so we wanted this conversation to start with this, and we wanted people to not just intellectually get the problem, but emotionally get the problem. And we showed this at the Consumer Financial Services Board, the CFPB, and to their board. And after the film ended, like the head of it said, we got to take a couple of minutes just to compose ourselves because it's heartbreaking when you see what people go through. It really, it can bring tears to your eyes.
Right. And, you know, you're a big company and you want to figure out what to do next and where to move. So you're doing a lot with Amex Ventures, working with startups. Tell me how that works.
Yeah.
And how you make a decision.
So we've got a couple of things that we are trying to do. I mean, one of the things is that we do have some resources within American Express to leverage against this problem.
Right.
And we are doing a financial inclusion lab in which we are asking academia to submit research, which we will fund. And that website goes live later today. We also set up a venture arm here in Silicon Valley in which we look to invest in companies that are promoting financial inclusion. We set up a $100 million fund out here. We look at kind of a couple of areas, but financial inclusion is one of our biggest. We just closed our first round in a company called Signify yesterday. I think we announced it this morning.
Right.
Signify works in 7 developing markets where they, on an opt-in basis from customers, look at cell phone records and do an algorithm to look at credit worthiness. Because as many people know, traditional FICO scores and, you know, your credit worthiness scores, they don't look at things like your rent payment or, you know, what your most recent record. I mean, there's a lot of things they exclude.
Right.
And therefore, people can't get a loan at a reasonable interest rate because so much of the data is not used. And so we think that this is just one very interesting model of many to support in looking at all of the different forms of data that might form sort of a different type of scoring methodology to extend credit. Because if you can extend credit to somebody at reasonable interest rates or an installment loan capacity as opposed to forcing them to go to pawn shops or give up their loved items or go to payday lenders or title loan companies, that's a good thing.
Right.
To go
So
do.
big data lets you extend the credit.
Yeah, exactly.
And your co-investor there is a Midyard Network, who's one of our long and supporters here, but also been involved with it forever.
Right.
So this is your first investment. It's also obviously your first co-investment out of this thing. How did you have to figure out how to partner, how to make the deal work and come to terms?
Well, we have a venture arm out here. There's 6 people out here in Silicon Valley. They're incredibly experienced in looking at the entrepreneurial community, the startup community. We looked at over 300 companies last year, for instance. And so we encourage anybody who's working in the arena of financial inclusion to submit to us. We look at all of them. We do screening criteria around it. And, you know, we want to invest in quite a number of companies in this arena.
Yeah. So we just have a little bit of time. I'm seeing the clock. Where will this be in 5 or 6 years? What do you see happening?
So I think we're entering the era of the non-bank is the way that I think about it, where you can do, like, the bank branch infrastructure is such an antiquated, out-of-date concept. It's incredibly expensive. Bank branches, you know, thousands close every year. Where do they close? All, 97%, in neighborhoods where the median income is below the national average. Right? So they're putting bank branches in rich neighborhoods, taking them out of poor neighborhoods. But the great thing is we don't need bank branches anymore. You don't need to go to a bank branch to cash currency, to get a checking account. You can do all of this now in the palm of your hand with a smartphone or even a feature phone through text type of functionality and software platforms, and go to a retail store and have a cashier be sort of the equivalent of what a teller used to be. And so this idea of the post office maybe doing something. There's some very innovative thinking about, how you can reimagine consumer financial services, and I think it can be extraordinarily powerful in solving this issue if we all come together around it.
Yeah, that's great. We could talk more, but it looks like we're out of time.
Okay, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Dana.
Great, thanks for that. And at SOCAP, we always like to take an opportunity to celebrate growth and development in the social capital markets and to have sort of milestone announcements. And with that, I'm going to welcome Daniel Epstein from Unreasonable to give you an announcement.
Thank you all so much. I have 2 announcements in 3 minutes. So I'll start with an introduction. First off, I'm nervous. Secondly, I'm the founder of the Unreasonable Institute, CEO of Unreasonable Group, and today, proudly announcing partner in Unreasonable Capital. But before I tell you about those announcements, I think I should take a second to rationalize a seemingly irrational name, which is Unreasonable. George Bernard Shaw, the Irish playwright, is famous for saying that the reasonable man adapts himself to the world, the unreasonable one persists in adapting the world to himself. Therefore, all progress depends on the unreasonable man and woman, of course. If George Bernard Shaw is right, then in a world where 1 billion people live in absolute poverty, another 1 billion people don't have access to clean drinking water, in a world where 2.5 million children under the age of 5 passed away from a preventable ailment like diarrhea last year. If George Bernard Shaw is right, if all progress depends on the unreasonable person, then it is our belief that we cannot afford not to bet on unreasonable people. That's what we've been doing at Unreasonable Institute and Unreasonable since day one. So 3 years ago, when I was on stage, we then had one organization at Unreasonable. It was the Unreasonable Institute. We are an international accelerator for early stage entrepreneurs, tackling seemingly intractable problems. Fast forward 3 years to today, and under the leadership of one of my partners, Teji Ravi-Lochen, the Institute has scaled. So we now have programs in Unreasonable East Africa. We have Unreasonable Mexico. We have Unreasonable Institute. We've launched Unreasonable Media, Unreasonable at Sea. And we're seeing about 1,000 entrepreneurs apply for our programs each year, and we select 40. We've worked with roughly 100 entrepreneurs with operations across 40 countries. And they're doing incredible work. And in short, the reason I bring all this up is because we have fantastic deal flow. And so today we are launching a sister organization called Unreasonable Capital. It's an early stage investment fund that will invest directly into entrepreneurs across emerging markets, solving these seemingly intractable problems. We have already placed one deal, and this week we'll be closing our second deal. And we're looking to grow that fund very quickly. So anybody here who's interested in investing into emerging markets, into incredibly fast-moving startups, solving impossibly hard problems, we'd love to partner with you. But I promised 2 introductions, or 2 announcements. The second one is we have a belief at Unreasonable that if we're actually going to have a chance in hell at putting a dent on global poverty, we have to focus our efforts on reaching adolescent girls living in poverty. There's 600 million of them. You all know the numbers. And so this fall, in November, we're launching the world's first accelerator dedicated to entrepreneurs who have the potential to impact millions of girls in poverty. We're calling it the Girl Effect Accelerator. It's in partnership with Nike and the Nike Foundation, and we would love to collaborate with anybody here on that program. That program also becomes a deal flow engine into Unreasonable Capital. So if you're excited about investing into emerging markets, if you believe in the importance of girls, we'd love to collaborate. Thanks so much.
Thanks. I'm all for the girl effect for sure. So great. So next up we have Danae Ringelmann from Indiegogo. And these days it's really hard to find someone who hasn't run an Indiegogo campaign or contributed to one or enjoyed a product that was funded through Indiegogo or just shared a campaign through social media. As the first online funding platform to launch in January of 2008, Indiegogo pioneered the industry and has grown to be the largest global funding platform with more than 200,000 campaigns. As a leader in the tech industry, Indiegogo's founder and chief development officer, Danae Ringelmann, is focused on supporting the continued evolution of social funding and social entrepreneurship. Danae has been listed on Fortune's 40 Under 40, Fast Company's top 50 women innovators in tech, and Elle Magazine's most influential women in the tech list. We're honored to have Danae here to speak with us about how social funding is changing finance for good. Please welcome Danae Ringelmann.
Hi, everybody. How are you doing this morning? Good. All right. It's actually really special for me to be here because my whole, the beginning of my life, essentially, in social entrepreneurship began with SOCAP. It actually began with Good Capital and Kevin Jones. He hired me, thankfully, to be an intern for a couple months. And so it's actually really cool to kind of be back in the world and be speaking up here today. So I'm excited to talk to you today about social funding. A lot of people call it crowdfunding. I actually think it's a terrible word for the industry, but we can talk about that later. But what I want to talk about today is how we're actually changing finance for good. And this is both permanently and for the better. Double entendre, totally intended. But to give you some background, you know, many of you guys have heard Indiegogo. We're now at it. It's like old news. You know, we're in every country. We're distributing millions of dollars every single week to every industry, entrepreneurs, artists, causes, you name it. If you have an idea, you can use Indiegogo to raise money. And where Indiegogo came from was this place of wanting to democratize access to capital. My co-founders and I saw ideas going unborn every single day, not for lack of heart and hustle, not even for a lack of an audience, but simply because they didn't know the right people. And so we wanted to blow that model up and make you not have to be dependent on knowing the right people. And that's why we created Indiegogo. And what actually Indiegogo became in the early days was this incredible alternative form of finance. I would actually like to say that when the credit crisis hit back in 2008 and 2009, that actually helped Indiegogo because it forced people to look outside of banks, look outside of VCs, look outside of the traditional financial systems to see where else can I get money to get my ideas off the ground. But then when the crisis subsided, I actually started to get a little worried. Are we a counter-cyclical company? Are we going to die when the economy comes back? And actually the exact opposite happened. That's when really things started to flourish. And the reason is that Indiegogo isn't just addressing the most obvious risk, which is financing risk, when you're an entrepreneur or social entrepreneur trying to get your idea off the ground. What we've actually found is that Indiegogo also addresses the two other major risks that you face when you're trying to birth an idea into this world. And that's market risk and execution risk. And it's exciting because this is why I think Indiegogo is here to stay and why social funding is going to be part of the entire fabric of finance and actually make finance a lot more sustainable. So what do I mean by market risk? So what is this actually, what am I actually saying? So a great example of this is gravity light. There's a light that these designers out of London had actually created a light where 30 seconds of lifting creates 30 minutes of energy. They saw it as an alternative to kerosene in the developing world. A lot safer and a lot cheaper. They couldn't get a venture capitalist to call them back. So what did they do? They did an Indiegogo campaign, and they raised $300,000, and in the process basically validated that they had a market. Kite Patch, same thing. What they did is they actually had raised some money, but they used Indiegogo not just to launch the product, but actually to build a brand. They ended up raising over $500,000. It's a kite patch that if you put on your arm, it emits this signal. It makes you invisible to mosquitoes, much better than mosquito nets. But they used Indiegogo not just to launch a product and raise the money, but actually to build that brand, to reduce that market risk. Same thing with Canoma Create. This actually was an idea, which is a JavaScript toolbox, where it was created by Marvell, which is a $5 billion company. But they used Indiegogo as a way to kind of build a community around the product before they actually launched. So thereby creating that market before they launched. Same thing for LavaMay, a mobile showers for the homeless. When they launched their Indiegogo campaign, they actually proved that this was something that could stick, and a whole bunch of cities started calling them saying, when can you come? When can you bring your mobile showers to my city? And solar roadways, a lot of people have heard of this one. Young, people in the middle of their life, inventors out of Idaho, were passionate about saving the world. They believed that if we could actually make all the roads across the world solar powered and cover them with solar panels, we could actually reduce the carbon emissions by 85% and make the roads a lot safer at the same time. So they ended up using Indiegogo. No, it's going to cost $1 trillion. No, it's not going to. They used Indiegogo to raise $2 million, and no, it's not going to just cost $2 million to change all roads across America and the world. But it was basically the beginning, and it actually put their idea on the map and actually earned them the respect from the press, from the media, from partners, from people who are actually now focusing on trying to make this idea happen. So those are examples of how these campaigns have used Indiegogo, not just to raise the money. Some of them didn't actually even need the money, but actually to build, to create that market and thereby reduce the market risk, prove that they have an idea that is worth coming to life in the world. On the execution risk side, sorry for the blue line here, we have plenty of people who are now using Indiegogo. Again, they have the money or maybe they don't have the money, but what they're doing is they're using it as a way to get smarter faster, to really test all of their assumptions and therefore refine their product market fit before they actually launch their idea. Skybell here is a perfect example. It's a smart doorbell, video doorbell. This guy had a whole roadmap of the features he wanted to launch, and based on his Indiegogo campaign and based on the feedback from his funders, he completely switched a lot of the prioritization of which features he needed to launch. Same thing with Kuli Kuli, which is a superfood snack. These young girls discovered moringa, which is a very special element that can actually, it's very healthy and cheap. And they're launching these new bars. They used Indiegogo to raise the $52,000, but they actually, in the process, learned who their early adopter segments were. It was yoga moms shopping at Whole Foods, which wasn't a hypothesis, but their campaign actually confirmed it. Same thing with Nix underwear. This is high-tech underwear out of Canada. Women, come ask me what that means later. It's awesome. And this woman was super excited about launching her underwear line, and she had three versions of her underwear, and she was convinced one was going to be a bestseller, but she threw in a third just because she thought it was cool and sexy. Guess which one became the most funded perk on her campaign? It was the third one that she thought of as an afterthought. So she actually completely discovered who her customers were and actually the customer mix, and she reshuffled her whole production schedule based on the demand proven in her Indiegogo campaign. Same thing with Jibo. This is the world's first family robot. They've raised almost $2 million. Dr. Cynthia Brazil out of MIT launched an Indiegogo campaign simply because she wanted to learn who her customers are and what they wanted to use this family robot for. In her mind, she thought it'd be like the personal assistant for the whole family. Well, what she learned is actually most of her funders are dudes, and most of them don't know how to cook. And so they're going to use this robot to learn how to cook. And that's why, and they wanted someone to talk to them and tell them what to do, how to follow the recipes. She had no concept that that was going to be the use case, but she learned that all through launching this idea, letting people fund it, and tell her what they wanted to do. Same thing with Misfit Shine. These guys are actually here from the Bay Area. They launched an activity tracker, and the whole point of it was to have an elegant solution to tracking your calories and your workouts and all this kind of stuff. So it was going to hide in your clothes and totally be hidden. In the process, he actually learned, when he launched his Indiegogo campaign, he actually offered his Shine in different colors, and actually learned that people were willing to fund the black version way more than the silver version, actually willing to pay $50 more for the black than the silver. He learned this all by swapping perks in and out and seeing what people funded and what they didn't. And also in the process, his funder said, he said, what else would you guys like? And they said, we really want bracelets and necklaces. And he started to fight with them, saying, well, the whole point of this is to hide in your clothes. Why would you want to wear it? And then he realized he was fighting with his customers, which as an entrepreneur, that's a very bad thing. So he said, okay, I'm going to get humble for a second. Let's prove it. And so he threw up a perk mid-campaign of bracelets and necklaces, and it got claimed overnight. And he completely unlocked a whole new revenue stream and accessory line, et cetera, that he never knew existed, all because he ran this campaign in a matter of weeks. So he likes to say, Indiegogo made me so much smarter, faster. No matter how much money I raise, I'm always going to do an Indiegogo campaign to launch a product. And this is one of my favorites. This is Miss Possible. This is a recent campaign, actually, out of two young entrepreneurs, just graduated college. They totally believe that, dolls are awesome, but we need more options than just Barbie. And if we want to get more girls into STEM, why don't we make dolls that look like Marie Curie or Jane Goodall or Rosalind Franklin? And so they've launched an Indiegogo campaign. They raised money to launch their first doll, which is modeled after Marie Curie. but they've turned to their funders to decide what's next, who are the future products. So all of us are now voting with our dollar on which dolls are coming next. It's a great way to market test. So as you can see, when you create a campaign and you invite the world to be part of the ideation and creation process, and you allow them to vote with their dollar, literally, what products, what features, what colors, at what price, you don't just raise money and reduce financing risk, which is incredibly important and valuable, but you actually reduce the market risk, which is the risk that you're making something that nobody cares about or not enough people care about. And you're also reducing execution risk, which is maybe you're solving a real problem in the right way, you're just not getting the product market fit right. You're charging too much, you're including too many features, what have you. And so Indiegogo has become this really flexible and open and quick and easy and fun and intense way to learn all of this in just a matter of weeks. And so what are the benefits of this then? It's more than just, what are the benefits of having less risk in the system? Clearly that's a positive. So what we're seeing now is we're seeing these campaigns actually using Indiegogo as a way to attract investment capital. So when you reduce your market and execution risk, you actually make yourself look better to the venture capitalists, to the banks of the world. Gravity Light and This Possible both gotten investor interest out of their Indiegogo campaigns. LavaMay got a $100,000 grant from Google, and Scanadu actually, which I haven't talked about, which is like this doctor in your pocket medical tricorder, which is literally from Star Trek days, but they made it a reality. They used Indiegogo to raise $1.6 million, and right after that, they actually were able to close a $10.3 million Series A round. But it's also being used not just to attract a traditional capital, but actually to close the capital. So I actually met Tinkerbots, which is robots for kids in Germany, and the guys behind that were actually able to close a $1 million venture round because they had written Indiegogo into their roadmap. And the venture investors were not willing to put the money into their company unless they knew they were going to do an Indiegogo campaign to product test before they launched. Same thing with Jibo. Their investment was partially contingent as well. So attract investment capital, close investment capital. The third is actually to make you spend your investment capital more wisely. So like I said, with Kite Patch, they had raised money from the Gates Foundation. Misfit Shine had raised money from actually venture capital, $7 million in venture capital, and Sonoma Crate came from a $5 billion semiconductor company. They use Indiegogo to really understand what products they need to build, what features they need to build, what pricing they need to do. So they actually are spending whatever capital they already have in a much more efficient and smart manner. And lastly, I'm running out of time here, is it's also a way to stay independent. So we're now actually starting to see people completely bypass the traditional financial system. We have Nix that went right, got picked up for distribution out of her campaign in Hudson Bay, which is like the Nordstroms of Canada. This was a first-time entrepreneur maker. She got her product through her first Indiegogo camp, came right into this big retailer, which is like the dream when you're a clothing manufacturer. Cooley Cooley got right into Whole Foods, and Skybell completely passed the venture world completely. Apple came calling to them, saying, we want you in our HomeKit store when we launch. So the question is, does this mean traditional financiers are going away? What's their role? Is this their future? Don't get nervous, guys, if you're an investor. This is what I like to say, who's an investor? And no one raises their hand. No, I don't think so, and this is why. I'll hold you in suspense for a little bit longer. What's happened is what Indiegogo is actually proving is that cash is becoming a commodity. So whether you can get cash from the crowd or from an investor, cash is cash. It doesn't really matter. And so what matters then is what else can the sources of cash bring you? So clearly the crowd can lower your execution and your market risk. So what must the traditional financier bring? And they do bring. They bring relationships. They bring expertise. Indiegogo took traditional venture capital. I know it is definitely beneficial. So the key is what we see is the two types of capital, whether it's the crowd capital or traditional capital, actually working hand in hand together. And the way we see that doing is in two ways. One is as Indiegogo being an incubation platform, and two as Indiegogo being a market testing platform. What I mean by incubation platform is that what we're seeing is because traditional venture investors, governments, et cetera, are looking at Indiegogo to try to find ideas that are market validated, they're bubbling up to the top, and they're actually using Indiegogo as a sourcing and a discovery platform. So that's why Indiegogo is literally in a merit-based fashion, bubbling up ideas to traditional capital so that they can have better ideas to actually invest in. And the same thing on the market testing platform. We're now seeing companies, like I said, venture capitalists requiring that when they make the investment that their portfolio company actually run an Indiegogo campaign before they launch, so that they're actually launching a product the world wants and not just a product they think the world wants. So the new role for traditional financiers then is one of amplifier. So we used to like to say that traditional finance is broken because it's inefficient, and it's inefficient because it's riddled with gatekeepers, and gatekeepers are just inefficient ways of allocating capital. But what we're doing now is we're actually turning traditional financiers into amplifiers. So when they're discovering ideas and putting money into them off of ideas that have already been community validated, they're bringing them out to the world. And what I like to say, they used to have two jobs. One is to bet right, and one is to amplify. It's the betting part that makes their job really risky, and it's the betting part that makes them want to say no more than they say yes. And so because we reduce a lot of the risk from the equation, we get to allow them to say yes more than they say no, and then they actually get to do the job which they probably wanted. The amplification job is the job that is the thing that probably attracted them to become an investor from the beginning, is they want to say yes, they want to help companies, launch and thrive and grow. So overall, what's happening is we're creating a more healthier financial ecosystem because we're getting more ideas going. We're enabling faster failure, which is actually, we all know, is a very good thing. If you can't raise money within a few weeks, if you can't prove that there's a demand for your idea, if you can't get your product market fit right, then maybe you're not ready, or maybe that idea isn't something the world actually wants. And so you can move on to the next thing and not waste the next 2 years of your life and all your life savings on something that was never going to see the light of day. And then the ones that get through, the ones that the world is actually funding, are the ideas that the world wants. So the ideas are better, that are coming to life. And the way they're coming up, the way they're bubbling up, is in a much more merit-based fashion. It's based on true market needs. It's not based on what a few people, traditional investors or gatekeepers, think the world wants. It's actually based on what the world wants, because the world is actually involved in voting. And as a result, then we're going to have less waste, because a lot of, on the physical side, the products that are coming out are the ones that are actually wanted. And when you do an Indiegogo campaign, you completely mitigate the risk of overproduction and underproduction. So you actually you produce exactly the amount that people want. So in the end, this is how I think Indiegogo is changing finance for good. It's both permanently making it more sustainable by reducing risk, and for the better, which is allowing more ideas in a merit-based fashion to bubble up to the top and exist. And that's all I got for you. Thank you.
Thanks for that. So we've heard the importance of story in a variety of settings so far from entrepreneurs, and the stories of their journeys as well. So take a second and prepare to engage in storytelling actively yourself. We're going to bring Ed Edmo back, a wisdom elder, and he's going to engage you in telling a short story. Ed?
Remember, everything moves within its own beauty and within its own time. Everything has a spirit, is as important as you and I. Remember, everything moves within its own beauty and within its own time. Everything has a spirit and is as important as you and I. Everything moves within its own beauty and within its own time. Everything has a spirit and is as important as you and I. Tatsmairi, that's next first for good morning. Tatsmairi. A long time ago, there was a young boy named Snake. He had arms, legs. Snake liked to run races. Snake liked to climb trees. But most of all, Snake liked to jump off of cliffs into sand. If Snake didn't like anything, he would say, "Oh, I need your help." When I go like this, make noise like a snake, everyone all together. If his brother or sister did something for a snake, snake didn't like it, he would say. If his aunt or uncle did something for a snake, snake didn't like it, he would say. If his mother or father did something for a snake, snake didn't like it, he would say. Even if his grandma or grandpa did something for a snake, snake didn't like it, he would say. One day the village went to another village to hunt, trade, and fish. Snake ran the race and lost. He told the other racers, they fixed him something to eat. Could have been a bowl of salmon eyeball soup. If he didn't like it, he'd tell the cooks. They sang him a new Indian song. He didn't like it, he'd tell the singers. They told him a story like I'm telling you, a new and different story. If he didn't like it, he'd tell a storyteller. What are you going to do about that snake? He makes us ashamed to go visit. You know, when you visit, you sit still, you eat what you're given, you don't act rude. What are you going to do about that snake every time he loses a race? He says, eat something he doesn't like, he says. Listens to a song he doesn't like, he says. Listens to a story he doesn't like, he says. All the time he says. We hate to take him along, he keeps saying. The night when it was quiet in the village, everyone was asleep. The medicine woman snuck into Snake's lodge. She took out a knife. She cut off Snake's arm, put Indian medicine on him, and he healed up. Cut off Snake's leg, put Indian medicine on him, and he healed up. Cut off Snake's other leg, put Indian medicine on him, and he healed up. Cut off Snake's other arm, put Indian medicine on him, and he healed up. Everyone get your hands up. All night, the people of the village, they rolled Snake, rolled Snake, rolled Snake, rolled Snake, and sang a magic song. Help me say it, everyone. All night they rolled Snake, rolled Snake, rolled Snake, rolled Snake, and sang a magic song. Everyone say it. All night they rolled Snake. And sing a magic song a little bit louder. All night they sing a magic song. All night they and sang a magic song. All night they and sing a magic song. All night they and sang a magic song. All night they and sang a magic song. Boy, that's a long night, huh? All night they and sang a magic song. Snake was long and round. You know how snakes look today? And he threw him down and he slithered away beneath people's feet. Snakes, they remember what people did to them long, long time ago. What do snakes say when they see human beings nowadays? Thank you. We tell our story to have respect for other people, so thank you for the respect you give me. Have a good day. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so we're going to wrap it up. We have our evening plenary tonight at 5:30. We'll be starting promptly again. And after that, don't forget our big party tonight over in the Impact Hub at SOCAP. And look forward to seeing you in sessions throughout the day. Thanks.